My name is Cecilia. I am 66 years old. For most of my life, I believed being a mother was not only my role but my entire identity. I devoted decades to that role, binding every dream, every sacrifice, every ounce of energy to my children. People always tell you that children grow up, start families of their own, and drift into their busy worlds. But what they never tell you is how hollow the silence becomes when they no longer need you, or worse, when they no longer want you. I had two sons, Isaac and Benjamin. Both had promising careers, lovely homes, families of their own. By all measures, they were successes. Yet when it came to me, the woman who had held their tiny hands, stayed up endless nights when fevers spiked, worked two jobs to cover their tuition. They had little time, their visits were rushed, their phone calls short, their "I love you, Mom" texts rare and perfunctory. It was as though I had become an accessory to their lives, something placed on a dusty shelf and only glanced at when convenience allowed. And then there was Mela, Isaac's wife. If indifference has a face, it was hers. Mela carried herself like I was an intrusion in their carefully polished lives. She treated my presence as a nuisance, my words as noise, my affection as overbearing. What stung the most wasn't Mela's coldness, but Isaac's silence. My son never defended me, never reminded her that I was not just some old woman, but his mother. Benjamin, though gentler, often followed Isaac's lead. The breaking point came one evening in the hospital. My doctor had recommended I stay under observation for a few days. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to make me wish for familiar voices beside my bed. I lay there in a sterile room, fluorescent lights humming above, imagining my sons walking in with warm smiles, perhaps bringing me flowers, or simply holding my hand. But they didn't come. Instead, they chose to attend Mela's lavish birthday party. I learned about it through pictures later: bright lights, expensive dresses, champagne flutes raised in endless toasts. And there I was, alone, tethered to an IV drip, listening to the echo of footsteps in the hallway, every sound reminding me that I had been abandoned. My phone rang. For a moment hope flickered. Perhaps they had changed their minds, perhaps they were on their way. I pressed the answer button and whispered, "Hello?" Isaac's voice boomed through the line, cheerful, careless, drowning in the background of music and laughter. "Mom, how are you? You're okay, right? We couldn't make it tonight. You know, Mela's birthday. But don't worry, tomorrow we'll stop by the hospital. Just hang in there." I forced a small reply, though my throat burned. "Yes, I'm fine." Fine. That word I had used for decades, covering bruises of disappointment with the flimsiest bandage. I hung up, staring at the ceiling, realizing something with piercing clarity. I had given 40 years of my life to raise children who could not spare 40 minutes for me. A nurse walked in, adjusting the IV. She smiled kindly, but I couldn't return it. My heart was too heavy. That night, as monitors beeped softly beside me, I decided something radical. If my children could build a world where my existence didn't matter, then I would build one where theirs didn't define me. The thought terrified me at first. Where would I go? How would I survive? Could a woman in her 60s carve out a life after decades of sacrifice? But as the hours passed, the fear began to morph into something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. I reached for the notebook I kept in the drawer. My hands trembled as I wrote, "Plan for freedom." Underneath, I scribbled a list. Step 1. Leave. Step 2. Start over. Step 3. Never look back. The pen dug so deep into the paper that it nearly tore. That's how desperate, how urgent it felt. I knew this wasn't going to be an impulsive rebellion. No, this was going to be a carefully constructed escape, one that my children would never anticipate. The following days in the hospital passed slowly, each minute etching determination deeper into my soul. I started observing details I had once ignored: the sound of doors closing, the schedule of nurses, the number of visitors. I wasn't just a patient anymore. I was a woman planning her liberation. Linda, my closest friend, visited every afternoon. She noticed the steel in my eyes, the restless tapping of my fingers. Cecilia, she whispered one evening. What are you thinking? I looked at her and for the first time confessed aloud. I'm leaving not just this hospital, not just this city. I'm leaving my children behind. Her lips parted, shocked, but she didn't argue. Linda had seen my years of silent endurance, had heard my late-night tears on the phone. Instead of judgment, she placed her hand over mine. If anyone deserves a new life, it's you. That night, I slept with a strange peace. My children were laughing at parties, clinking glasses, celebrating without a thought for me. But I was already imagining the day I would vanish from their lives, leaving behind nothing but a lane and the echo of all the love they had squandered. And for the first time in decades, I felt alive. The next morning, I woke up to the sterile smell of disinfectant mixed with the faint aroma of hospital coffee. The hallway outside my door echoed with footsteps of nurses switching shifts. Life in a hospital is a clock without hands, days blur, nights stretch, and the only rhythm you have is the quiet hum of machines. But inside me, a different rhythm had begun. It was the pulse of resolve. Linda arrived as always at 2 p.m. carrying a paper bag with homemade soup and a small bouquet of daisies. She was my anchor in a world that had slowly drifted away. I told her everything about the notebook, about my plan, about the sense of urgency that burned inside me like a quiet fire. She listened, nodding, her eyes brimming with a mixture of concern and admiration. You're serious about this, she said softly. I've never been more serious in my life, I replied. For years I've been existing for them. It's time I live for me. Linda took a deep breath. Then let me help you. You won't do this alone. That night, while my children were probably scrolling through their phones or planning another dinner party, I sat up in bed outlining the details of my escape. The first step was clear. I couldn't simply vanish. I needed to make sure my affairs were legally protected. My apartment, my modest savings, my pension, someone I trusted had to manage them. Linda offered without hesitation. I'll handle everything, she said the next day. You sign the papers, and I'll close the chapters here while you start new ones somewhere else. But where would I go? For weeks the question had hung in the air like a shadow. Then, as if fate had been listening, my phone rang. It was my cousin Hope from Dallas. Cecilia, she said in her warm, lilting voice, I've been thinking about you. Why don't you come stay with me for a while? Dallas is beautiful this time of year. The parks are full of life, the markets are vibrant, and no one here knows your story. You could start fresh. Start fresh. The words felt like a door opening in my chest. Maybe I will, I said quietly. In the days that followed, the hospital visits from my children grew shorter, more mechanical. They brought polite smiles and awkward small talk, never staying long enough to see the disappointment flicker in my eyes. They didn't notice the green dress folded neatly in my bag, or the letters I began drafting late at night. They didn't see the way my spirit was pulling away from them, strand by strand, like a rope unraveling. One afternoon, Isaac and Benjamin arrived together, with Mela trailing behind. They spoke in hushed tones about plans and arrangements. Benjamin finally cleared his throat. Mom, he began. Diana and I were talking. We think it might be time for you to consider a senior living facility. You know, somewhere with 24-hour care, nurses, activities. It would be good for you. A nursing home. They were planning my exile, as if I were a logistical problem, not a person. Mela jumped in, excitement lacing her voice. We visited one last weekend. It's very clean. The food looks decent. It's about $2,000 a month, but with your pension and a small contribution from us, it's totally feasible. $2,000 a month. The same cost as the designer dress she had worn to her birthday party. Isaac added, best of all, you'd be surrounded by people your age. You could make friends, play cards, participate in activities. It would be much better than being alone in that apartment where no one can take care of you if something happens. I sat in silence, my face an unreadable mask. They weren't asking me. They were telling me. My life had been reduced to a plan. They discussed over coffee. Mela continued. It would also be safer for everyone. If you have another medical emergency, the staff could handle it without us having to leave our jobs or important commitments. There it was, the naked truth. They wanted to make sure that the next time I was dying, it wouldn't disrupt their schedules. When did you plan to implement this? I asked, my voice calm but steady. Well, there's no hurry, Benjamin said. Maybe in the next 2 or 3 months. That way you have time to get used to the idea. 2 or 3 months. The time they gave me to prepare for my official exile. You know what? I said, a strange smile creeping across my lips. I think you're right. I think I need to make a radical change in my life. Relief washed over their faces. Isaac even smiled. I'm glad you see it that way, Mom. It's going to be best for everyone. Without a doubt, I replied. It's going to be best for everyone. They spent the next hour discussing details about the facility, their work schedules, and their upcoming vacations, as if I were no longer in the room. Diana showed Mela photos on her phone of the birthday party, the one more important than my life. This is the cake, she said proudly. It cost $300, but worth every penny. A quarter of what I spent on food in an entire month. And this is the dress Benjamin gave me, she continued. It cost $1,200. Isn't it divine? My husband said, I deserve it. She deserved it. But I didn't deserve their presence at my hospital bed. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they began making the typical farewell gestures. Mela checked her watch for the third time. Diana yawned dramatically. Benjamin scrolled his phone. Well, Mom, Isaac said, standing up. We have dinner with Mela's parents. We don't want to be late. Dinner with Mela's parents. Of course it's okay, dears. Go in peace. Each gave me a quick superficial kiss on the forehead, the kind given out of obligation. Diana even wiped her lips afterward, as if my skin had left some residue. We'll call you this week, Benjamin promised from the door. And we'll start researching more senior living facilities. Mela added, take care of yourself, mother-in-law. Diana said with a false smile. Don't worry about anything. We'll handle everything. They left, their expensive perfume lingering in the room, leaving me alone with the echo of their empty promises. The weeks turned into months, and Dallas slowly became more than a refuge. It became my home. Each morning, I woke to the smell of jasmine drifting through Hope's garden, and each night I went to sleep without the weight of resentment pressing down on my chest. I had discovered a rhythm of life that was entirely my own: morning walks with women who quickly became dear friends, afternoons filled with painting, reading, and part-time work at the boutique, and evenings where laughter over dinner felt genuine, not forced. For the first time in decades, I wasn't performing the role of mother. I was simply Cecilia. Yet freedom, as liberating as it was, had its own shadows. My children's messages, desperate, apologetic, sometimes angry, still arrived from time to time. I never replied, but I read each one carefully. Their words were filled with confusion, guilt, and pleas for reconciliation. Mom, please, just let us hear your voice. Or we'll come visit if you tell us where you are. Each message carried the weight of what they had ignored for so many years, but instead of softening me, they reminded me why I had left in the first place. Love begged for at the last moment is not love, it is fear of loss. 6 months after my arrival, something unexpected happened. While at the boutique one afternoon, I overheard 2 women talking about a new community center program, where seniors could share their life stories as part of a project to preserve local history. The idea intrigued me. For so long, my story had been swallowed by the needs of others, erased by my children's indifference. Now, the thought of telling it, not to demand pity, but to honor my own survival, felt like reclaiming a part of myself. When I stood in front of the small group for the first time, my hands trembled. But as I began to speak about sacrifice, about invisibility, about a mother who nearly died alone because her children chose a party, I felt strength returning to my voice. The room grew silent, and I saw recognition in the eyes of other women. Some had different stories, but the same wounds: neglect, dismissal, the heavy loneliness of being needed but not cherished. When I finished, there was no applause, just quiet nods, tears, and the unspoken bond of shared pain. It was after one of these sessions that Mr. Harrison approached me again. He had become a kind presence in my life, someone who respected my independence while reminding me that companionship need not demand sacrifice. "You've lived through storms most people can't even imagine," he told me. "But storms have a way of shaping the strongest trees. You're one of them, Cecilia." His words did not awaken romance, but gave me a sense of dignity I had forgotten men could offer without conditions. Meanwhile, my children's silence grew louder. After months of messages, one day it stopped. No calls, no texts, nothing. At first, I thought it might be relief, an end to their attempts to control my narrative. But in the quiet that followed, I wondered if they had finally accepted my absence, or if their pride had built a wall too high to climb. A part of me wanted them to keep trying, not because I needed them back, but because silence felt like a second abandonment. The answer came unexpectedly. One crisp autumn morning, Hope handed me a letter with trembling fingers. "It came to my mailbox," she explained. "I think they've found you." The envelope was addressed in Isaac's handwriting, careful but slightly shaky. I sat in the garden before opening it, staring at the roses as if they could give me courage. Inside was not anger, nor manipulation, but something different: humility. "Mom, we've realized words will never be enough. We've failed you in ways we cannot undo. But we want to see you, not to convince you to return, but to listen if you'll let us. Please give us a chance to stand before you as sons, not as strangers who let their mother down." I folded the letter and placed it on the table, my heart pounding. This was what I had once prayed for, begged for, cried for, and yet now that it was here, I wasn't sure if I wanted it. The life I had built in Dallas was fragile but real. Letting them back in could unravel everything. That night, I wrote in my diary, "They finally want to see me, but am I ready to see them? I am not the same Cecilia they abandoned. I am stronger, freer, and unwilling to return to that cage. If they come to me, it must be on my terms, not theirs." The decision weighed on me for days. I spoke with Hope, who reminded me that forgiveness was not about them, it was about me. "You don't owe them your return, Cecilia," she said gently. "But if you choose to face them, do it because you want closure, not because you feel guilty." Weeks later, on a cool November morning, I sat in the community center once again, sharing my story with strangers who had become companions in healing. As I spoke, I realized that my journey was no longer just about escaping my children's neglect. It was about reclaiming the right to define myself beyond motherhood. When the session ended, I stepped outside into the golden light of fall. My phone buzzed with another message from Isaac, asking if I would agree to meet. I didn't answer, not yet. Instead, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in decades, the choice was mine. Entirely mine, whether I met them or not, whether forgiveness ever came or not. My life was no longer in their hands. I walked home slowly, the sound of leaves crunching under my feet, a smile tugging at my lips. I had lost my children, yes, but in their absence, I had found something greater: myself. The months rolled gently by in Dallas, weaving themselves into a rhythm I never thought I would experience again. Seasons shifted, spring melted into summer, and with each sunrise, I found myself more firmly rooted in the life I had chosen. My garden bloomed under the Texas sun, my friendships deepened, and my laughter grew freer, unburdened by the weight of ungrateful expectations. One crisp Saturday morning, as I was setting the table for breakfast in Hope's backyard, my phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. Against my usual instinct, I answered. A small, hesitant voice filled the line. "Grandma, it's Emily." My heart stopped. Emily, Isaac's eldest daughter. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I hadn't heard my grandchildren call me in years. Emily, sweetheart, how did you get this number? My voice shook. I found it in Dad's old papers. He doesn't know I'm calling. Grandma, I just wanted to tell you I miss you. And, I'm sorry. I don't know everything that happened, but I know you loved us. And I love you too. Tears streamed down my face as I sank into a chair. Emily's words were simple, but they pierced through years of silence and neglect. Thank you, darling, I whispered. You don't know what this means to me. From that day on, Emily began calling me once a week. At first we spoke cautiously. School, her hobbies, little things, but soon she opened her heart, telling me about her dreams of studying art, her struggles with her parents' constant busyness, her longing for someone to truly listen, and I did listen. With all my heart. Through Emily, I found a bridge back to a part of my family I thought I had lost forever. Slowly, two of my other grandchildren began reaching out as well, not because their parents encouraged it, but because they too felt the absence of a grandmother's love. Isaac and Benjamin eventually found out. One day, Isaac himself called. His voice was weary, stripped of pride. Mom, I know we don't deserve another chance, but the kids, they need you. They talk about you all the time. If you're open to it, maybe we can arrange visits. On your terms. No pressure. I thought long and hard. I had promised myself I would never crawl back into the cage of obligation. But this wasn't about obligation. This was about love, freely given and freely received. All right, Isaac, I said gently. I'll see the children. But understand this. I am no longer the mother who sacrifices herself to be tolerated. I am Celia. I live my own life now. If you want to be part of it, it must be with respect. He paused, then said quietly, I understand, and surprisingly, he did. Over the next year, my grandchildren visited Dallas during school breaks. They filled my days with laughter, stories, and youthful energy. We baked together, painted in the garden, and shared secrets over hot cocoa. They saw me not as the fragile, overlooked woman their parents once treated as an afterthought, but as a vibrant grandmother, full of wisdom, love, and joy. Hope often said, Celia, you've done something remarkable. You've broken a cycle. You didn't just save yourself. You gave your grandchildren a gift their parents never understood how to give. She was right. By my 68th birthday, my life had blossomed into something I could never have imagined during those lonely nights in my old apartment. Friends, community, learning, love. It all surrounded me. And though the scars of my children's neglect would never fully fade, they no longer defined me. That evening, after a joyful birthday dinner in Hope's garden, Emily slipped a handmade card into my hands. On the front, she had painted a sunrise. Inside, she had written, Grandma, thank you for showing me that it's never too late to start over. You're my inspiration. I held the card to my chest, overwhelmed. For so long I had believed my life was closing into darkness. Yet here it was, bursting open into light. As the moon rose over the jasmine-scented garden, I sat back in my chair, surrounded by laughter and the soft hum of life. For the first time in decades, I was not haunted by what I had lost, but grateful for what I had gained. I whispered to myself, this is the life I deserve. Not perfect, not without scars, but full of truth, love, and freedom. And deep within me, I knew I had not only reclaimed my dignity, I had created a legacy of courage and hope that would outlive me in the hearts of those who truly mattered. At last, Cecilia was whole. The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. For a long time I stared at the pale hospital ceiling, tracing invisible patterns with my eyes, letting the reality of their words sink in. And nursing home. To them I was not their mother, not the woman who had spent decades sacrificing everything for their comfort. I was a burden to be relocated, a problem to be solved with monthly payments and polite phone calls. When Linda entered a few minutes later, carrying her usual thermos of tea, she immediately sensed the atmosphere. They've just left, haven't they? She asked gently. I nodded, unable to form words. She sat beside me, her hand covering mine. You don't have to tell me what they said. I can see it on your face. They want to put me in a home, I whispered, my voice trembling not with weakness, but with restrained fury. They think they're solving my life like a puzzle, one they can rearrange to suit their schedules. Linda's jaw tightened. You deserve better than that. You deserve freedom. And with those words, the decision I had been circling for weeks crystallized. I was leaving. Not next month. Not after another round of excuses. Soon, that night. After the nurses had dimmed the lights and the corridors fell silent, I began writing my letter. The pen felt heavy in my hand, as if every word carried the weight of decades. I addressed it to all three of my children and Diana. The paper trembled slightly under my grip, but my mind was clear. I wrote about the years I had devoted to them, the meals skipped so they could eat, the dreams postponed so theirs could flourish, the hours of work endured so they could live comfortably. And I wrote about the night of my heart attack, when I lay alone, while they celebrated at a party. By the time you read this, I wrote, I will be gone, not gone from this world, but gone from your lives. I will no longer be the mother you take for granted, the woman you visit out of duty, the shadow who waits by the phone for your rare calls. I am choosing myself. I am choosing dignity. The words flowed like a river long dammed, now breaking free. I told them I wanted them to know what abandonment felt like. The hollow ache of waiting for someone who never comes. The pain of realizing love has conditions. I wanted them to carry that guilt, not because I wished them harm, but because I wanted them to finally understand what they had done to me. I ended the letter simply, I am not angry anymore. I am free. Do not look for me. Live your lives as you wish. I will live mine as I should have long ago. Cecilia. When I put the pen down, I felt lighter, as if I had shed not just words but years of silent suffering. The next morning, Linda returned. I showed her the letter. She read it slowly, her lips tightening with every line, and when she finished, her eyes shone with tears. It's powerful, she whispered. It's the truth. You'll deliver it? I asked. Of course, but not until you're far away. They'll look for you, Cecilia. You need time. We spent the following days planning. Fiona, my young nurse with kind eyes, introduced us to her sister Sarah, an attorney. Sarah prepared the legal documents, a power of attorney granting Linda the authority to handle my affairs, a certification of my mental competence, and clear evidence that this was a deliberate choice, not a rash act. Your children can't challenge this, Sarah assured me as I signed under the fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor. You have every right to decide your life. By the end of the week, everything was ready. Linda had retrieved my modest savings, $8,000 from the bank. My suitcase was packed discreetly with clothes she had gathered from my apartment. My cousin Hope in Dallas awaited me with open arms. On Sunday evening, as twilight painted the hospital walls in shades of orange and gray, I put on the dark green dress I had bought years earlier. Mila had once scoffed that the color didn't suit me, but that night it felt perfect. Green was the color of hope, of new beginnings. Fiona came to my room as planned. Her shift ending at 8, Mrs. Stone, are you ready? She asked softly. Ready as I'll ever be, I answered, placing the sealed envelope on my pillow. My children's names stared back at me from the neat handwriting they had long since forgotten. We walked down the hospital corridor like ordinary visitors, leaving after hours. The timing was perfect, enough movement to blend in, not enough to draw attention. My heart pounded, but it wasn't fear, it was exhilaration. Outside, in the dim parking lot, Sarah waited with the documents. She handed them over with professional precision, and I signed beneath the yellow glow of a flickering lamp. From this moment, she said, you are free. Linda hailed a taxi, and we rode in silence to the bus terminal. I could feel her eyes on me, worried yet proud. At the counter, I purchased a ticket for the night bus to Dallas, departing at 10 p.m. 12 hours. The clerk said, you'll arrive by morning. Perfect. By the time my children read the letter, I would already be hundreds of miles away. Sitting in the waiting area, Linda reached for my hand. I'm proud of you, she whispered. You're braver than anyone I know. I'm not starting from nothing, I replied. I'm starting with 66 years of experience, $8,000, and the certainty that I deserve more than crumbs of affection. When the announcement came, we hugged like sisters. Take care of yourself, Cecilia. Call me when you arrive. I will. Every week. You're the only real family I have left. I boarded the bus with my small suitcase and a heart pounding with something I hadn't felt in decades: dignity. As the bus pulled away, I took out my phone and typed one final message to my children. By the time you read this, I will be far away. A letter waits for you in my hospital bed. Do not look for me. Be happy with your priorities. I will be happy without you. I pressed send, then turned off the phone. Their desperate replies would never reach me. They had their chance. Through the window, I watched the city lights fade, replaced by the quiet darkness of the highway. Each mile carried me further from abandonment and closer to possibility. For the first time in 40 years, I felt hope. The morning sun spilled through the curtains of Hope's house, painting the walls of my room with golden warmth. It had been almost a year since I'd stepped onto that night bus, leaving behind not just a city but an entire life of quiet sacrifice and invisible suffering. Dallas had become more than a refuge. It had become a canvas where I was learning for the first time to paint a life of my own choosing. I sat by the window with my journal in hand, a cup of coffee steaming beside me. The roses in the garden were in full bloom, releasing a fragrance that mixed with the scent of fresh coffee and lavender soap. It was the smell of peace, of a life reclaimed. I ran my fingers over the pages of my journal, where I had documented each step of my transformation: the fear of leaving, the liberation of arriving, the joy of small victories. For once, my story was mine. My phone buzzed on the table. I hesitated, as I always did before looking at the screen. For months I had been cautious, guarding my fragile new happiness like a flame in the wind. But this time the message was from someone I had come to treasure: my granddaughter Lily. "Grandma, can we video call tonight? I miss you." Just reading her words filled my chest with warmth. She was only 10, Benjamin's daughter, curious and bright. After I left, it had been Lily who reached out first. A small message on social media, hesitant and innocent: "Are you okay, Grandma?" That simple act had become the bridge between my old life and the new one. Through her, I began to rebuild a bond, not with my children, who had hurt me so deeply, but with the new generation that still saw me as someone worth loving. That evening, when her smiling face appeared on my phone screen, I felt tears well up. "Grandma, she shouted with the kind of enthusiasm only a child can give. I got an A on my art project. I drew a tree with all the seasons in one picture. Want to see it?" She held up the paper, colors bursting across the screen. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. "It's beautiful, Lily. You have real talent. Did you know I've been taking painting classes too? Maybe one day we can paint together." Her eyes lit up. "Really? Then when I visit you, you have to teach me." Those words, "when I visit you," were like music. They meant hope. They meant continuity. They meant that despite everything, love could survive the mistakes of the past. After the call, I sat back, overwhelmed by gratitude. My children might never fully understand the weight of what they had done. They might carry guilt for years, or bury it under excuses. But Lily, she saw me. And in her I saw a chance to pass down not just stories but strength, the strength to never let herself be diminished by anyone. Life in Dallas had blossomed into something far richer than I ever expected. My mornings were filled with walks in the park with women who had quickly become sisters in spirit. Some had stories eerily similar to mine: mothers forgotten by their children, wives discarded by selfish husbands, women who had given everything until nothing was left. We laughed, we shared, we healed together. Afternoons were for the boutique, where my eye for style and patience with customers earned me both income and purpose. I loved watching women leave the shop with not just a new dress, but a spark of confidence they hadn't felt in years. Evenings were often reserved for painting, reading, or on special nights, dance class with Mr. Harrison. Ah, Mr. Harrison. A widower with kind eyes who had become my closest companion. We weren't lovers, but we were partners in joy. He made me laugh when my thoughts grew heavy, and I offered him comfort when the loneliness of widowhood pressed too hard. We held hands during dances, not out of romance, but out of a shared understanding that human connection, in any form, was worth cherishing. One night, after class, he said softly, "Cecilia, I hope you know that your courage has inspired more people than you realize. You didn't just save yourself, you gave others the permission to dream again." His words sank deep into me. For so long, I had thought my story was one of loss, of abandonment, of endings. But maybe it was also a story of beginnings, not just mine but for anyone who needed proof that it was never too late to start over. My children still sent messages occasionally. At first desperate, then pleading, then angry, and finally resigned. Recently, though, their tone had shifted again, softer, more reflective. One day, Isaac wrote, "Mom, Lily told me you two have been talking. She's happier than I've seen her in a long time. Maybe one day, when you're ready, we could all sit down together. No pressure, just together." I didn't reply right away. Part of me still hurt, and forgiveness was not a door I could open overnight. But for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I read his words. I felt possibility. Perhaps distance had done what years of begging could not, forced them to confront their own failures. Hope, ever the optimist, encouraged me gently. "Cecilia, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting them hurt you again. It just means you choose peace for yourself. Whether you let them in or not, that choice will always be yours now." Her words echoed in my mind for weeks. And slowly I began to see forgiveness not as surrender but as liberation from bitterness, from the weight of old wounds. On my 67th birthday, Hope organized a gathering in her backyard. Friends from the park came with flowers, Mr. Harrison brought a bottle of wine, and even Lily joined via video call, singing happy birthday, off-key but with so much love it brought me to tears. As I blew out the candles, I made a wish not for the past to change, but for the courage to keep embracing the future, one day at a time. That night, lying in bed, I realized something profound. I had not just survived abandonment, I had transformed it. What was once a wound had become a doorway. What was once despair had become strength, and what was once silence had become a voice. My voice. For the first time in over 40 years, I was living not as someone's mother, not as someone's sacrifice, but simply as Cecilia. And that finally was enough. The bus rumbled through the night, carrying me farther from the life I had known and deeper into the unknown. I tried to sleep, but my mind refused rest. Memories surged like waves. Isaac's first steps, Benjamin's first day at school, Diana's laughter when she braided my hair. For years those memories had been my treasure. Now they felt like chains I was finally breaking. At dawn, the driver announced our arrival in Dallas. The city unfolded outside my window. Tall buildings bathed in soft golden light, streets beginning to stir, the smell of coffee drifting from roadside diners. My heart pounded as if I were a young girl starting an adventure. Hope waited at the station, waving enthusiastically. She was my cousin, but more like a sister. Her hug was warm and steady, grounding me. "Cecilia," she said with a smile, "you look like a woman reborn." "I feel like one," I answered, tears threatening. She led me to her modest home, a small house with a garden full of roses and a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. It wasn't luxurious, but it was full of warmth. Photos on the walls, books on the shelves, the smell of fresh bread in the kitchen. For the first time in years, I felt welcome without having to earn it. Hope introduced me to her circle of friends, a group of women from the neighborhood who met daily in the park. They weren't wealthy or glamorous, but they were genuine. They listened when I spoke, they laughed at my jokes, they valued my company. I was stunned at how natural it felt to belong. With my savings, I rented a small studio apartment just 2 streets away from Hope's house. It had a narrow balcony overlooking the park. The first night I slept there, on a bed still wrapped in plastic, I cried not from sadness but from relief. I had a space that was mine, not my children's guest room, not a hospital ward, not a corner at someone else's table, mine. Days turned into weeks, and I built routines I had never thought possible. Morning walks in the park, afternoon coffees with Hope and her friends, evenings reading novels I had always wanted to finish. Linda called every Sunday, her voice carrying encouragement and updates. Fiona sent me photos of her newborn baby, calling me Grandma Cecilia. Even Sarah the lawyer checked in occasionally, asking how my new life project was going. I had lost 3 children, but I had gained a family of choice. Still, there were moments of weakness. Sometimes I stared at my phone, wondering if Isaac or Benjamin had read my letter, if Diana had cried. Part of me longed for their voices, their apologies. But then I remembered the hospital room, the silence of that night, and the choice they had made. They had abandoned me long before I abandoned them. 6 weeks after moving, I received an email. The subject line, Mum. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was from Benjamin. Mum, we found your letter. We're shocked. We didn't realize how badly we hurt you. Mela thinks you're overreacting. But I feel guilty. Please, can we talk? I closed the laptop without replying, not out of cruelty but out of strength. Talking would only pull me back into their world of excuses. I needed to live in mine. Instead, I joined a senior literature course at the local university. Walking into that classroom, surrounded by books and eager students half my age, I felt alive. The professor, a kind man with gray hair and spectacles, encouraged me to write. You have stories inside you, Cecilia. Stories that deserve to be told. I began keeping a diary, pouring my heart into its pages. Not about my children, not about pain, but about discovery. My first swim in the community pool at 66. My laughter during karaoke night, with Hope's friends. My trembling voice reading poetry aloud in class. Each entry was proof that life could bloom even in late seasons. One evening, after class, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea. The park below was lit by soft lamps. Children still playing, couples walking hand in hand. I thought about the woman I used to be. The mother waiting by the phone, the woman shrinking herself to fit into her children's lives. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who had chosen herself. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from Diana. Mum, please, I miss you. Just tell me you're okay. I typed back. I am okay. More than okay. I hope one day you will be too. And then for the first time I turned off my phone, not in anger but in peace. Dallas slowly stopped being a city of strangers and became my city. Every corner I discovered carried the thrill of ownership. The bakery where the owner saved me the freshest croissants, the park bench where Hope and I fed the pigeons, the small boutique where I worked part-time helping customers choose dresses. My days were simple, but for the first time in decades, simplicity meant freedom, not emptiness. One morning, as I walked through the park, an old man with kind eyes and silver hair approached. His name was Mr. Harrison. He was a widower who had moved to Dallas 2 years earlier. We struck up a conversation about the flowers in bloom, and soon he became a regular part of my afternoons. We never spoke of romance, but we shared laughter, stories, and long walks. He treated me not as a burden or background figure, but as someone worthy of respect. That alone was enough to make my heart feel lighter. Meanwhile, my children's voices echoed through unanswered messages. At first they pleaded, then they accused, then they grew silent. Silence was more powerful than I had expected. It revealed their helplessness, their inability to control me anymore. For 40 years I had danced to their rhythm. Now they were the ones waiting for my next move, and there would be none. 6 months after my arrival, Linda called with news. Cecilia, she said, your children are restless. They've started asking neighbors, even calling the hospital again. They're desperate. Let them be desperate, I whispered. Maybe that's what they need to understand the value of what they lost. That evening, I lit a candle on my balcony and opened my diary. I wrote, freedom is not running away, it is walking toward yourself. Today I realized that every unanswered call is a wall protecting my peace. Every silence I give them is a seed I plant for my own future. The next morning, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text. A real letter in Isaac's handwriting. The envelope trembled in my hands. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Mom," it began, "if this is truly what you want, we will respect it. But please, forgive us. We didn't see you. We thought you'd always be there. We were blind. We're trying to change. Even if you never return, even if we never see you again, I want you to know that I'm sorry. I miss you. Isaac." I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my diary. His words were genuine, but they came years too late. Forgiveness was possible, maybe someday. Forgetting was not. By then, my life in Dallas had blossomed beyond anything I had expected. Hope and I joined a senior dance class, where laughter filled the air more than music did. I started painting lessons, my hands trembling at first, then steady as I mixed colors of freedom onto the canvas. I even read one of my diary entries aloud during a local poetry night, and strangers clapped as if my story mattered. On my 67th birthday, Hope threw me a small party in her garden. Candles flickered among the roses, music played softly, and friends surrounded me with warmth. As I blew out the candles, I made no wish. For the first time in decades, I didn't need to. I already had everything I wished for: dignity, peace, and the courage to live on my own terms. That night, as I wrote in my diary, I realized something profound. Leaving my children wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning. Their absence no longer defined me. My presence, my choices, my joy. That was my new definition. I closed the diary, looked out at the starlit sky, and whispered to myself, "This is life. This is mine." When I woke up the next morning in Dallas, the sunlight streamed through the window of my cousin Hope's home. For the first time in many years, I didn't feel the weight of dread pressing down on my chest. Instead, I felt a quiet anticipation for the unknown. Hope had prepared breakfast in the garden, where roses and jasmine filled the air with fragrance. This is how morning should feel, I thought to myself, sipping warm tea while listening to the sound of birds instead of the constant buzzing of unanswered calls. The first weeks passed quickly. I joined Hope on daily walks in the park, where I was introduced to a group of women my age. They welcomed me warmly without judgment, without asking what mistakes I had supposedly made as a mother. To them, I wasn't a failed matriarch. I was simply Cecilia, a woman starting anew. In the afternoons, I attended painting classes at the cultural center. My brushstrokes were shaky at first, but each canvas felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I had buried long ago. Meanwhile, my phone filled with desperate messages from my children. At first they were angry, demanding that I return. Later they turned pleading, almost childlike. "Mom, we need you. We'll change. We'll make more time." But every word felt like a performance, just like the ones I had endured all my life. Their remorse wasn't about love, it was about fear. Fear of losing control over the woman they had always treated as an accessory to their lives. One evening, Hope handed me her tablet. "Look, Cecilia," she said softly. My children had posted a family photo online, all of them sitting together, smiling stiffly. The caption read, "Family is everything." I laughed bitterly. Family had been everything to me for decades, until I realized I was not part of theirs. I didn't comment, didn't react. Silence, I discovered, was the most powerful response. By the third month, I had settled into a rhythm. I found a part-time job at a boutique downtown, helping women choose clothes that made them feel beautiful. It was ironic. I had spent years watching my daughters-in-law flaunt designer dresses while I wore the same faded sweaters. Now I was the one guiding women with dignity and kindness, and they valued my advice. My boss often said, "Cecilia, you make people feel seen." That simple sentence healed more wounds than any apology my children could ever offer. Yet, the letters and calls from my children never truly stopped. One day, Benjamin sent me a message that made me pause. "Mom, if this is what you really want, we'll respect it." We just want to know you're safe and happy. You were right. We failed you. I read the words again and again. Did I feel satisfaction? A little, but mostly, I felt a calm certainty. Regret was theirs to carry, not mine. I had already paid my debt of sacrifice. I owed them nothing more. 6 months after arriving in Dallas, Hope organized a small gathering for my birthday. There were flowers from the garden, a homemade cake, and friends from the park and the boutique. They sang to me with genuine joy, not obligation. That night, as I looked around the table, I realized I was finally living what I had always begged for: simple affection, freely given. Not once did my mind drift to whether my children would call. For the first time in decades, I celebrated myself without expecting disappointment. Later that year, I joined a literature course at the university. Imagine that, me at 67, sitting in a classroom, notebook in hand, discussing books I had only dreamed of reading when I was young. My professor said, "It's never too late to start writing your own story." His words struck me like lightning. That was exactly what I had done. Rewritten my life. As the seasons changed, so did I. The bitterness that once weighed on me softened into something else. Strength. I didn't need to forgive my children to be free. I didn't need them to validate my worth. My happiness was no longer tied to their attention, but to my own choices. On a quiet spring morning, I sat in the garden with a diary on my lap. I wrote, "Today I am not the abandoned mother. I am not the invisible woman who waited by the phone. I am Cecilia, a woman who chose herself, who traded sorrow for dignity, and who finally understands that freedom is the greatest gift of all." I closed the diary, inhaled the scent of jasmine, and smiled. The life I had always deserved was finally mine.